I was not always an outsider in the Williams family. For 25 years, I tried everything to fit in to be accepted as one of their own. Despite being adopted at age 7, I worked twice as hard to earn their approval. My adoptive siblings, Jessica and Thomas, always reminded me I was different, but Grandpa Harold saw something in me the others missed. He treated me like his own flesh and blood. Last month, when the family lawyer announced I was cut out of Harold's will for not being real family, I felt my world collapse. But then came the phone call that changed everything. Now, with $3 million in my name, suddenly the family that disowned me cannot stop calling. If you are watching this from a place where family betrayal hit close to home, I understand that pain. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had family show their true colors when money enters the picture. Let me tell you how I discovered who really cared about me. My story begins 25 years ago. I was just 7 years old when a drunk driver took both my parents from me in a single night. After 3 months in foster care, the Williams family adopted me. Martha and George Williams already had 2 biological children. Jessica was 9 and Thomas was 11 when I arrived. From day one, I could sense I was different in their eyes. Remember, Burton, we are giving you opportunities many orphans never get. Martha would remind me whenever I failed to show enough gratitude for new school clothes or Christmas presents that were notably less expensive than what Jessica and Thomas received. The family home in suburban Connecticut had 5 bedrooms, but somehow I ended up in the converted attic space. "You are lucky to have your own floor," George would say. I later realized it was their way of keeping me separate from their real family. School was where the differences became most apparent. Thomas and Jessica attended private school with tuition that cost more than a small car each year. I went to the local public school because, as Martha explained, we already had educational plans for our children before you came along. The one person who never made me feel like an outsider was Grandpa Harold. He was George's father, a self-made businessman who had built a successful construction supply company from nothing. Every Sunday afternoon, while the rest of the family was at their country club, Harold would pick me up in his old pickup truck for our fishing trips. "Burton, my boy, sometimes the family we choose matters more than the family we are born into," he would say, as we sat by the lake, fishing rods in hand. I married into this family just like you did in a way. We both had to earn our place. Those Sunday afternoons were sacred. Harold taught me how to fish, how to change the oil in a car, how to shake someone's hand properly, and most importantly, how to stand tall when others tried to make me feel small. "Your worth is not determined by their acceptance," he told me once, after I mentioned Thomas had purposely excluded me from his birthday party. "Your worth is in here," he pointed to my heart. When college applications came around, Jessica and Thomas had their pick of private universities fully funded by their parents. I worked after school and weekends, maintaining a 4.0 GPA to earn scholarships. Harold secretly slipped me a check for $5,000 toward my first-year tuition. "Do not tell your parents," he whispered. I gave the others the same when they went off to school. I later learned Jessica and Thomas had each received $50,000 for college. I studied engineering at State University, working 30 hours a week at a hardware store to cover what my scholarships did not. Meanwhile, Thomas partied through business school before dropping out in his junior year, and Jessica got her finding herself liberal arts degree before opening a boutique that hemorrhaged money from day one. After graduation, I landed a job as a project manager at a construction firm in Boston, moving 2 hours away from the family home. The distance felt like freedom. I visited for major holidays and called once a month, but those interactions always left me feeling drained. Harold was the only one I maintained real contact with. Every Sunday, without fail, we would talk on the phone for an hour, continuing our tradition even without the fishing trips. When Harold turned 78, his health began to decline rapidly. Congestive heart failure, the doctors said. I drove to Connecticut every weekend to visit him in the hospital, while the rest of the family would make appearances once every few weeks, usually timed to coincide with doctor visits where important decisions might be made. "The vultures are circling," Harold joked weakly during one of my visits after Thomas and Jessica had just left. Suddenly, they remember they have a grandfather. 2 weeks before he passed, Harold had a moment of unusual clarity. He gripped my hand with surprising strength and said, "Burton, remember that true family stands by you when there is nothing to gain. The rest are just relatives." At the time, I thought it was just another of his philosophical observations. I had no idea he was leaving me a clue about what was to come. The last time I saw him conscious, Harold made the nurse leave us alone for 5 minutes. His voice was barely audible. "I have always seen you, Burton," he whispered, even when they did not. "Promise me you will remember that in the days ahead." I promised, though I did not understand what he meant. 3 days later, Harold Williams passed away peacefully in his sleep. I was at work when I got the call from Martha, her voice oddly detached as she informed me of the funeral arrangements. Harold's funeral was held at the Episcopal church he had attended his entire life. I sat in the front row with the family, though there was a noticeable gap between me and Thomas. Martha dabbed at dry eyes with a black handkerchief, while George stared stoically ahead. Jessica sniffled periodically, checking her reflection in her compact mirror between tissue dabs. The church was packed. Harold had been respected in the community, both as a businessman and philanthropist. As people shared stories about his generosity and integrity, I realized how much of him I saw in myself. Despite no biological connection, he had shaped me more than anyone else in my life. 3 days after the funeral, we all gathered at the office of Walter Pembroke, the family attorney who had handled Williams' family matters for decades. His wood-paneled office screamed old money with leather-bound books and oil paintings of stern-looking men in suits. "Thank you all for coming during this difficult time," Pembroke began, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "Harold Williams was very specific about his wishes, and I am here to execute them as written." Martha sat with perfect posture, hands folded in her lap. George cleared his throat every few minutes, clearly impatient. Jessica and Thomas exchanged meaningful glances, barely containing their anticipation. Pembroke read through standard legal language before getting to the allocations. Small bequests went to Harold's church and 3 local charities. The family vacation home in Vermont went jointly to Martha and George. Then came the business holdings and primary financial assets. The entirety of Harold Williams' controlling interest in Williams Supply Corporation, along with all remaining financial accounts, real estate, and personal property, not otherwise specified, shall be divided equally between his true family members, Jessica Marie Williams and Thomas Harold Williams. The attorney looked up from the document. Mr. Williams was quite specific that these assets remain within the bloodline of the Williams family. Martha reached for George's hand, both of them wearing expressions of appropriate solemnity mixed with satisfaction. I sat stunned, feeling as though I had been punched in the stomach. After 25 years, countless fishing trips, life advice, and what I thought was a genuine bond, Harold had cut me out completely. Not even a keepsake or token remembrance. "There is a personal note here addressed to Burton Clark." Pembroke continued, pulling a sealed envelope from his folder and handing it to me. With trembling hands, I opened it, feeling 5 pairs of eyes on me. Inside was a single sentence in Harold's shaky handwriting. "Blood is only one way to make a family." That was it. No explanation, no apology, nothing that made sense of this betrayal. I felt hot tears threatening to spill over, but refused to break down in front of them. "Is there anything else?" I managed to ask, my voice steadier than I felt. Pembroke shook his head. "That concludes the reading of Harold Williams' last will and testament." As we filed out of the office, Jessica brushed past me with a smirk. "Sorry, Burton. Looks like Grandpa finally figured out who his real family was." Thomas clapped my shoulder with false sympathy. "No hard feelings, right? You had a good run as the charity case. I drove back to Boston, in a daze Harold's cryptic note burning a hole in my pocket. For the next week, I barely functioned. I called in sick to work, ignored phone calls, and spent my days trying to understand how I could have misread my relationship with Harold so completely. Had it all been in my head? Was I just the project he took on out of pity? 7 days after the will reading, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. I nearly ignored it, but something compelled me to answer. Burton Clark. This is Daniel Sullivan, Harold Williams' personal attorney. We need to meet as soon as possible. I was confused. I thought Walter Pembroke was Harold's attorney. Pembroke handles the family's legal affairs. I handled Harold's private matters. There are things you need to know that cannot be discussed over the phone. Can you come to my office tomorrow? The next morning, I found myself in a modest office above a deli in downtown Boston. Sullivan was nothing like Pembroke. He wore a rumpled suit and had the tired eyes of someone who had seen too much of human nature at its worst. Harold was my client for 40 years, but more importantly, he was my friend. Sullivan began. What I am about to show you was arranged over a year ago with explicit instructions about timing. He pulled out a thick folder and a USB drive. This is Harold's true last will and testament, superseding the one read by Pembroke last week. It was designed this way deliberately. Sullivan handed me a sealed envelope with my name written in Harold's handwriting. Inside was a 4-page letter that would forever change my understanding of my adoptive family and my place in it. My dear Burton, it began, if you are reading this, then the first act of our play has concluded as expected. Forgive an old man's dramatics, but I needed you to see the truth with your own eyes. Harold explained that he had long observed how the family treated me as an outsider despite my efforts. He detailed specific incidents, holidays where my gifts were afterthoughts, achievements that went uncelebrated, subtle exclusions year after year. He had watched me work twice as hard for half the recognition, all while maintaining my dignity. The public will was a test I knew they would fail, he wrote. I needed you to see clearly what I have observed for 20 years. They have shown you who they truly are. Believe them. The letter went on to explain that this second will left me $3 million outright, plus a 10% ownership stake in Williams Supply Corporation. The rest was divided among charities with modest trust funds for Jessica's and Thomas's children. Money reveals character, Burton. Watch carefully in the days ahead. When they discover this second, your phone will ring with sudden concern and renewed family feeling. Remember who called you when there was nothing to gain. I looked up at Sullivan, my mind reeling. This feels cruel. To them and to me. Sullivan nodded slowly. Harold debated this approach for months. In the end, he said, you deserve to know the unvarnished truth about your family before deciding who to keep in your life. The choice will be yours. When will they find out? Official notifications go out tomorrow morning. I expect your phone will begin ringing by afternoon. Sullivan was right. At 2:17 the following afternoon, my phone lit up with Martha's name. I let it go to voicemail. She called 3 more times before leaving a message, dripping with affection and concern. Burton, darling, there seems to have been a terrible miscommunication about Father's will. Please call us as soon as you can. We are all so worried about you. By evening, I had 6 missed calls from Martha, 4 from George, and text messages from both Jessica and Thomas, expressing their confusion about the situation and their desire to make things right as a family. I maintained radio silence for 2 days, following Harold's advice to observe their behavior from a distance. Jessica was the first to show up unannounced at my apartment door, bearing a gift basket and a smile I had never seen directed at me before. Burton. I was so worried when you would not answer calls. She pushed past me into my apartment. This whole will situation is just a terrible misunderstanding. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. It seemed pretty clear to me When you said Grandpa finally figured out who his real family was, Jessica flinched, then recovered with practiced charm. I was upset. We all say things we do not mean when we are emotional. You know how much you mean to all of us. Funny, I do not recall you calling me once in the past 3 years, except to ask for help moving your furniture. Her smile faltered. We have all been so busy, but family is family, right, blood or not. The irony of her using Harold's words was not lost on me. Actually, Jessica, I have plans tonight. Perhaps we can catch up another time. I moved toward the door. Her expression soured momentarily before she plastered on another smile. Of course. Maybe you could come to dinner this weekend. Mom is making your favorite lasagna. I had never liked lasagna, and Martha knew it. This was the level of effort they were putting into their performance. Thomas called that evening with sudden brotherly concern. "Hey, Burton, just checking in," Jessica said. "You seemed upset earlier. Did she?" "Look, man, I know things have been weird with the will stuff, but we are still family." "Are we?" "Because last week you called me the charity case." A pause. I was being a jerk. You know how it is with family. We say stupid stuff sometimes. Funny how I became family again after the second will came to light. Another long pause. "That is not fair, Burton. We have always considered you family." "When was the last time you called me before today, Thomas?" He cleared his throat. "I have been meaning to reach out. Things have been crazy with the kids and the mortgage." "Right. Well, I need to go." "Wait," he said quickly. "We are having a family dinner on Saturday. Mom really wants you there." 2 days later, I found myself sitting at the familiar dining table in the Williams family home for the first time in over 2 years. Martha had outdone herself with the meal. All dishes she thought were my favorites, though she had managed to get most of them wrong. "We are so glad you could join us," Burton Martha said warmly, passing a bowl of mashed potatoes my way. "It has been too long since we had the whole family together." George nodded enthusiastically. "Too long, indeed. You know, Burton, I have been thinking. With your background in project management, you would be a tremendous asset to the company. We should discuss a position for you." I took a small bite of food. Interesting. "When I graduated and asked about working for Williams Supply, you told me you did not believe in nepotism." George chuckled nervously. "Well, that was before I fully understood your capabilities. Your success speaks for itself." After dinner, Martha brought out a photo album I had never seen before. I was looking through our family photos yesterday and realized we have so many wonderful memories together. She flipped to images of family vacations and holidays where I had been relegated to the background or asked to take the photo. In a few, I had clearly been cropped into existing family pictures, a poor Photoshop job that was almost comical. "Remember this trip to the Grand Canyon?" she asked, pointing to a photo where Thomas and Jessica stood with their parents. I had been left with a neighbor that summer because the trip was too expensive to include everyone. "I was not on that trip, Martha. You said it was a special trip for your children." The room grew uncomfortable. Martha quickly flipped to another page. "Oh, how silly of me. Senior moments, you know." As coffee was served, Jessica casually mentioned her boutique was struggling and she was looking for investors. Thomas brought up his second mortgage and his son's medical bills. The choreography of their manipulation was almost impressive in its transparency. When the financial hints became too obvious to ignore, I finally spoke up. "It is interesting how none of you called me after the first will reading. Not even to check if I was okay after being completely cut out." The room went silent. Martha set down her coffee cup carefully. "Burton, we were all processing our grief in our own ways." Is that what it was? Because Jessica made it very clear at the lawyer's office that I was finally being put in my place as a non-family member. Jessica's face flushed. "That is not what I said." "It is exactly what you said. Just like Thomas called me the charity case." George cleared his throat. "Burton, there may have been some unfortunate comments made in the heat of the moment, but we have always considered you part of this family. Really? Is that why I slept in the attic while there were 2 empty bedrooms on the second floor? Is that why my college fund was scholarships and part-time jobs while you fully funded their education? Is that why I have not been invited to a family gathering? In over 2 years, Martha's eyes welled with tears. We gave you a home when you had none. We fed and clothed. You put a roof over your head. Yes, and you never let me forget. It was charity. Not once in 25 years did you make me feel like I belonged. Jessica's facade finally cracked. You were always Grandpa's pet project. He felt sorry for you, and now he is trying to buy your way into a family that never wanted you in the first place. Thomas jumped in. You manipulated an old man in his final years. We were his real family, not some stray he picked up to make himself feel better about being a lousy father to. Dad Martha was openly crying now, but her words held no genuine remorse. We took you in when nobody wanted you. This is how you repay us. By stealing what belongs to my real children, George pounded his fist on the table. We will contest the will. Harold was not in his right mind. No judge will uphold this travesty. I stood up calmly, finally seeing with perfect clarity what Harold had wanted me to understand. Thank you for dinner and for showing me exactly who you all are. Harold was right about everything. As I walked toward the door, George called after me. You will regret turning your back on this family. Burton blood is thicker than water. I turned back one last time. Funny thing about that expression. The full version is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It actually means the opposite of what you think. The family we choose is stronger than the family we are born into. Harold chose me. None of you ever did. With that, I walked out feeling lighter than I had in 25 years. In the weeks that followed, I experienced a whirlwind of emotions. Anger came first, white-hot and all-consuming. I fantasized about ways to flaunt my inheritance, to rub their faces in what they had lost. I drafted scathing emails detailing every slight and exclusion I had endured, but I never sent them. Instead, I made an appointment with Daniel Sullivan to discuss the family's threats to contest the will. They do not have a case, Sullivan assured me. Harold documented everything meticulously. He had psychological evaluations proving his mental competence. He also recorded Jessica and Thomas making disparaging remarks about you at family gatherings. He was building evidence for years. Why would he go to all that trouble, I asked. Sullivan's expression softened. Harold regretted not intervening sooner on your behalf. He told me once that watching how they treated you was like watching his own childhood play out again. His father favored his brother in much the same way. As my anger faded, I found myself wondering what Harold would advise me to do in this situation. I remembered one of our fishing trips when I was 15. A man in another boat had deliberately cast his line across ours, tangling our equipment and ruining our spot. I could report him to the park ranger. I had fumed. Or tangle his line next time. Harold had simply started packing up our gear. The best revenge is to go find a better fishing spot and catch bigger fish. Staying here to fight just ruins our day too. The memory sparked something in me. Pursuing revenge or dwelling in bitterness would only keep me trapped in the toxic dynamic that had defined much of my life. It was time to find a better fishing spot. I used part of my inheritance to establish the Harold Williams Adoption Support Foundation, dedicated to helping adoptees and foster children transition into permanent homes and providing ongoing support through college scholarships. The foundation also offered resources to help adoptive families create genuinely inclusive environments. I relocated to Seattle, accepting a senior project management position with an innovative construction firm specializing in sustainable buildings. The physical distance from Connecticut provided space to heal and start fresh. My 10% ownership in Williams Supply Corporation remained a silent investment. I had no interest in involving myself in the family business. Through the foundation work, I connected with other adoptees who understood the complex emotions of never quite belonging. Slowly, I built a network of genuine friendships. One of these new friends was Lisa, the Foundation's legal counsel, who had herself been adopted as a teenager. Our friendship gradually blossomed into something deeper. A year after Harold's death, the Foundation held its first major event, a weekend retreat for adoptive families, focusing on building genuine connections. As I gave the opening remarks, I spotted a familiar figure in the back row. Martha had come alone. After my speech, she approached hesitantly. "It was a lovely talk," she said, her eyes taking in the Foundation banner bearing Harold's name. "Thank you for coming," I replied, genuinely surprised by her presence. "The Foundation is doing important work," she said, then added after a pause. "George and I have separated the stress of the past year." It brought out many truths we had been avoiding. I nodded, unsure what response she expected. "I have been seeing a therapist," she continued. "She suggested I needed to make amends for certain failures as a parent. Even now, she could not directly acknowledge how she had treated me. But there was something fragile in her expression that seemed genuine. "Would you like to get coffee sometime?" she asked. "I understand if you would rather not." I considered her request carefully. Coffee would be fine, not as family pretending the past did not happen, but as two people who shared a history, trying to find a better way forward. Relief flickered across her face. "That seems fair." 2 months later, Daniel Sullivan contacted me about executing Harold's final instruction, college trust funds for Thomas's children. Despite everything Harold had wanted to ensure his great-grandchildren had educational opportunities. "You can decline to follow this instruction," Sullivan told me. "Given the circumstances, no one would blame you." I thought about it for several days before deciding to honor Harold's wishes. Not for Thomas, but for his children who were innocent in all this. The trusts were established with strict educational parameters and no possibility for Thomas to access the funds directly. Over time, I found that the inheritance that had initially seemed like the central plot twist in my story was actually just the catalyst for the real gift Harold had given me: freedom from seeking validation from people incapable of providing it. The money provided security, but the truth had provided liberation. I still keep Harold's fishing tackle box on my office shelf. Sometimes, when facing a difficult decision, I open it and imagine what advice he would give. Usually, it comes down to the same wisdom he shared throughout my life. Integrity matters more than approval. Chosen family often loves more genuinely than blood relatives. And the most valuable inheritance is not money, but the lessons we carry forward. Has your family ever shown their true colors when money was involved? Leave a comment below sharing your experience. If my story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life stories about family dynamics and personal growth. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that family is about love and respect, not DNA or legal documents. Thank you for listening to my journey from rejection to reclaiming my worth. Remember, sometimes the family we choose becomes the foundation we build our best lives upon.